Hello, and welcome to the first in a two-part series of tutorials where I will be teaching you about how you can take a Rhino drawings into Illustrator and then edit them with color, playing with line weights, and adding some texture. This first video in this tutorial, we will be focusing on Rhino. We will be talking about a workspace that works best for me when I am engaging in this particular workflow. We will talk about the make 2D command, tips and tricks of what options to select when you are exporting specific type of drawings. And we will also touch on the clipping plane tool as a way of getting some sections. This tutorial will wrap up with us exporting an isometric drawing and preparing it for Illustrator. So if you are getting a start on Rhino, you are just learning it and have created any design objects, and you would want to know how to start making drawings out of any extrusions or designs, well, this is a tutorial for you. Should be pretty beginner friendly. So yeah, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the first of a two series tutorials where I will be talking about a workflow for when you want to take some drawings from Rhino and import them into Illustrator. If you are just getting to know the software, both of these softwares, it should be beginner friendly. But basically, in this first tutorial of the series, what we will do, we will look at this file where there is a architectural space within a landform, and we are going to use the make 2D command to get a few conventional drawings out of it. In terms of the sequence for this tutorial, we will go over the workspace and why it's set up the way it is, and how it's one that has benefited me when I go about these workflows. And then we will talk about the make 2D command. We'll talk about some options that you should select when you are exporting specific type of drawings. We'll go over the clipping plane tool as a way of facilitating getting sections out of Rhino, and we will wrap up this tutorial by exporting a isometric drawing and preparing it for Illustrator. So if this is something that you might find interesting, then yeah, hope you can follow along, and let's get into it. So I just want to start by, as I said earlier in the introduction, by talking a little bit about the workspace. If you notice, I have my 4 windows where I can see the top view of this project, an isometric, and then some elevations, a left and a back view. Also, you will notice that I have these panels set up a certain way, and this is personal preference, but it's also a way of making some of these processes quicker for me. So again, this is a tutorial more about a specific workflow and just suggestions from my own experience, because I'm sure you can find a lot of tutorials about how to do these things online, as I have done in the past. So why do I have it set up this way? If you notice, not with only Rhino, but Illustrator, Photoshop, and many softwares, I like having my layers accessible, and that's something that I would recommend you to make as a good practice, to organize everything that you're doing in layers. So if you don't know how I did that, um, let's say your Rhino looks a little bit more like this, where every single tab is organized in this manner, and you have a long vertical panel. You can take the layers tab out of that group, and then you can move it and add it anywhere, really, right? I could have added here to the left. And as you see, when I hover around this area, it's highlighting like a vertical rectangular square, or a more horizontal rectangle right here. So you would want to move it, at least how I move it. I hover it until the bottom section is highlighted, and once I let that go, it starts to set up a space for the layers, and you can resize it as I just did, and now you have your layers down here. So that would be my first advice. The other thing is, I have my properties on top. So the reason why I do that is because it'll come in handy in the future. But in essence, the main reason I do it is because it's much easier to change the layer of an object, whether it's a line, a plane, a surface, solid, etc., by changing the properties. So right now what we're seeing in the properties panel, it's telling us the information of the active viewport, right? That's why it says it's top. If I were to click here, it'll change the ISO. It's going to talk about the size. It's going to talk about the lengths. You can change the camera lens if you were playing with perspective. So there's a lot of really useful settings that you can quickly change through this properties panel. But if I select something, let's say I select the landform, this properties panel now changes, right? And a few things you'll notice, it's telling me about the type of object that this is. It's an open poly surface. But the most important thing, it's telling me the layer where it's located. So I can change this really easily by just, let's say I would want it to be in layer 6. I can do this, and now it takes not only the display color of layer 6, which is this hot pink, right? But it also takes the layer, the rendering material, which was a plaster, right? So that also changed. I'm going to take it back to that red layer because I made custom plaster material for it. But that works for objects, but again, it also works for lines. And the reason why I'm emphasizing lines is because once we go into the make 2D command and we get some lines, there might be some lines that you might want to copy or move into different layers as a part of your cleaning and preparation of these drawings for exporting, right? That's the main thing, right? So we covered that. Our next thing is that we're going to go into the make 2D command. As you see, again, this is more of an architectural space, but the make 2D command works for anything that you have designed, regardless of the scale, regardless of the complexity. You can use it for if you're designing a table or a chair or a smaller object, it's great. If you're designing a skyscraper, it's great. It's just giving you 2D line work with which you can work on. So I'm gonna go ahead and just to use as an example, I'm gonna start making 2D drawings of these particular views. So I like to work, just to preface, I like to work on my views separately. So if I want a top view, I'll just go into the top view and select the object there. And I'm just going to type make 2D. So when you type make 2D, this box is going to show up. So when you type make 2D, this box is going to show up. It's going to talk to you about the type of lines and options available for the line work that Rhino is going to produce for you. So I like to keep projection in the view that I want to work on. There are other options that would work depending on the type of deliverables or drawings you're trying to export, but I'll just keep it in view. We want the top view of this. And then properties from the input objects, which is the ones we selected. And then I just want to go over a few of these things. So you don't have to check all these boxes. These boxes depends on the type of drawing that you want to get. Tangent edges is, and you can see when you click on it, it's going to start showing up in this smaller box with the image. So it's extra information depending on the complexity or the kind of language of your planes or surfaces and solids and whatnot. If you are working on sort of assembly, or you would want to show something that's behind the planes in the particular view, you might want to turn on hidden lines. The scene silhouette, we'll go back to it when we talk about the isometric, but it basically adds a darker outline, or just the lines for creating a darker outline. Before rectangle, we'll just add sort of a rectangle surrounding this. And then I don't use these two. I don't group the output because I like to still be able to work individually with these lines. If you were to select it, you can still ungroup it. And then this, if you could register with previous Make2Ds if that was something that you were interested in. And then the back thing is one of the most important things. You'll notice that I had already been playing around with these settings, but you should be saving your views or your drawings and naming them, right? So if I want a top view drawing, I'm just going to type top view. I'm not going to type top view drawing because that's already layer made and Rhino doesn't let you do that. So you just, I'm just going to call this top view D, and I'm going to click OK. And Rhino is thinking. And once it finishes thinking, you'll notice that it exported the drawing right here, right? So here we have a good base for this top view of the structure, right? And then you'll also notice that you have a new layer that has been created that says top view D, where it basically only has the curves, right? Because we didn't select any of the other options. That's something that I would have not wanted to do for this particular drawing. But let's say the important thing, and just to point this out a little bit, when you are working on a Rhino drawing, or just drafting a drawing in general, it's going to give you a very flat just collection of lines that are in the same level. I forgot to select this, right? But as you know, when you're doing a drawing, an orthographic planar 2D drawing, you would want to have some hierarchy and some line weights to be able to make the drawing pop a little bit better, right? So that's where adding new layers and having these properties, property panel up here is beneficial, because let's say, and I'm not going to spend too much time in this for the sake of time, right? But let's say you wanted to make a layer where lines are secondary or tertiary. You start creating a hierarchy of lines, and you might want to change the color of those lines to make them slightly a different color, just for the sake of this, right? You can start changing the properties of these lines and moving it into that layer, or moving it into other layers. So something I'm gonna do is, just as an example, we would not want the lines of these steps to be as dark as the lines that make the roof or these walls surrounding it, right? Because hierarchy. So when I select these open curves, I can start seeing in which layer it's located. And I can change that. I can say, hey, I want these lines to now be in the secondary layer, and I want them, I want its display to not be black. I want it to be at least, its display to be by layer. So what that means is that now these lines are going to be green. So it's a way of you starting to prepare this line work for Illustrator, right? So, because if you'll notice, it has some lines, line colors, but the line colors have to do with the display property of color, display color property of the objects, right? So, anyways, that's just a suggestion. And if you notice, if I were to hide these curves now, or hide these ones, right, they are in different layers and much easier to work on, right? So I would probably move these ones also to a secondary, tertiary level. This as well is like a kind of seating situation and whatnot. So that's just something to think about, right? So now we did a top view. The same logic applies if we want an elevation. Let's say we want an elevation drawing of this back view. Same thing applies. So what we're going to do is select the object from this back view, and then we're going to type make 2D. We're going to keep the same settings. I am only going to select tangent edges just so that we can start seeing what that would start to look like and how the make 2D exports it. But we're going to call this back elevation, right? And then we click OK. It's going to lay it on top of your other drawing. That's okay. It normally exports everything within close to the origin of your top view workspace. Or we're going to move it down here. It's okay. Using the gumball tool. And you'll notice I am going to hide this layer, right? Because I don't need to see that right now. I also, oh, sorry. I need to make sure that I am not using it as a parent layer. I'm going to turn that off. And now if you'll notice, there are some extra lines here. And those lines have to do with the construction, the tangent edges. It has to do with the construction of this design. So you'll see that the make 2D in the bottom right here, it made two separate sublayers, one that are tangents. If I toggle them on and off, this is what's happening. And then I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see that better. Right? And then your regular curves. So normally you wouldn't want many of these tangent edges. I'm going to change the display so we can also see what lines it's starting to show. The reason why these lines are showing doesn't mean that these lines you have to make a drawing with those lines. It's talking about a little bit of the construction of this design. This was a part of like an example file that I used a few years ago with some with a foundation class. talking about how you can start kind of extruding surfaces, pushing and pulling faces with Rhino, and then thinking about Boolean addition and subtraction kind of uh, um, interactions, right? But and that's why we can start seeing these tangent edges, is because the original extrusion was probably up to here, and then we kept extruding and pushing the face further. But that is not necessary, right? That is not how those lines are not something that we would want to show. We might want to show this one here, this horizontal one, because it's the moment where the roof starts to arch. So it could be beneficial to have those tangent edges. Did you see, in a way, it's talking about the history of how this was constructed. But if you were not to have that, you could add your own lines and finish the drawing yourself. So, and this is just another advice when you are exporting and working with the Make 2D, but basically with anything related to Rhino or any other digital software. Do not take as law anything that the like everything that the software gives you. Just because the software gives you this particular set of lines doesn't mean that it's 100% correct or the best way to talk and convey your project. So that might mean that you would have to do some editing, some trimming, some cleaning up, or that might mean that you might need to add more information in the way of 2D line work as well. So just keep that in mind. But I just wanted to show you what an elevation drawing would look like if we were to have some tangent edges as well. So now we have that. We have the top view drawing, the elevation. And then I'm going to go ahead and do I'm going to go to the isometric drawing right now. I'm going to go ahead and do my default layer so that I can hide these layers. I don't need to use them now. And now we are going to select this object in my isometric view. And if you don't know how to set an isometric view, you just go here, set view, and then ISO, right? You can choose whatever kind of particular option that's available right here. Basically, you would know what view you want. We're in the northeast because we're looking at the top view as a guide. This being north, this being east. We're looking at this angle, seeing this part of the stairs and this bottom level, right? So this would be a northeast isometric view. So going to select that. I'm going to type Make 2D again. And the only thing that I would add, I'm going to keep the tangent edges just so that we see what that looks like in 3D. I'm going to add the hidden lines. Basically going to add the other options that we have not been able to look at so far, leaving the clipping planar sections for our section that we will do after this. So we're going to do this. We're going to rename this isometric drawing northeast, and we're gonna click OK. Just as a heads up, the more options you select, the more complex the design is, the more time it'll take. So be patient. This will not take a lot of time because it's not really that complex, but it might happen, right? So there we go. Now we have another drawing. I'm gonna move it down here, and I'm gonna go here so we can start seeing what's going on. We have, if I go down here, now it added a sub layer that's called hidden, and another above the other previous sub layer that was called visible. So if I were to turn off these hidden lines, this is what a base drawing for that would look like. And again, if I were to turn off the tangent edges, right, it would look a little bit cleaner, but it might have information that you might want to carry on and keep as part of your drawing that you would export, right? I would want to probably keep these lines, and these lines, right? But some others, like these ones, are not necessary, so just keep that in mind. Right? So, and again, it's a matter of cleaning it up. You can use the trim tool and then selecting all these lines. You can start doing that if you want it. I might want to clean up the landform and keep it pretty simple. There's this opening on the bottom because we're talking about it subtracting from the landform, and then talking about how this could be a pool of some sort. But you can start trimming, right? Or you could go ahead and instead of doing that, you could make a new layer and then call it tangents final or something, and you can just say, hey, I only want to keep these lines, and let's say these lines, right? And you just change the layer of it, you change the display by layer. Let's make it a different color that's not in this palette, and then you'll know that it's in the appropriate corresponding layer, right? There. So again, you just clean it. The other thing I wanted to show you, two things. The hidden lines. So basically, it's just showing us information that we might not been able to notice, right? Obviously, because things are hidden. So it really depends on what you're trying to talk about. If you would have wanted to highlight the vertical circulation, you could use these hidden lines from the stairs and then just add it, right? But again, cleaning it up, I don't think it's something that's necessary for this type of project because it gets too busy, but it's good to see, it starts to give a bit more of an understanding of what's going on. I'm going to hide that because, again, I don't think that's something I would want to keep for this export. I'm going to take off these tangent lines. You'll notice that there are some lines, again, as I said earlier, do not take this as a final kind of export. There's some information that Rhino might not convey, and that is fine, or there's might be extra information that is not necessary, like these lines. So you can start trimming and you can start cleaning it up. You can add an extra line here, and then you can join these. Right, so it's a bit of a process, right? And now the last thing I wanted to show you is the scene silhouette. If I turn off this one and these curves, you start noticing that we have an outline. And this is a really great convention of lines to have when working with isometrics, because this scene silhouette is going to be the way you can start differentiating your object from the canvas of a page, right, or the space surrounding it. So again, you notice that there are some things that are kind of off, like this here. I would trim that so that it feels more like a continuous line, and it's missing some information, right? And the reason why it's missing that is because this part of the roof structure is in the way. So what I'm going to do, I am going to copy, and you can type copy, and then you can paste it into the same place, right? Right. You could have done it another way. You could literally use the shortcut Control C, which in Rhino is copy to clipboard, and then Control V, which is paste. And then it would just paste it in the exact location where the original was at, which is something that could be beneficial for you copying things from one file, Rhino file, to another Rhino file. But I just used the regular just copy command. So now we know that it made a copy, because when I try to click on that line, this box shows up, which is telling me that there are two curves in the same point where I selected. So just click on it, and I don't want this line to be in my curve layer. I want it to be in my scene silhouette, right? And if I turn off this curve layer, now I see that it copied that line there, and I can go ahead and similarly just trim, and then now I get a continuous sort of line. It looks continuous, but it's separate elements. So my last advice would be to just select everything and type join, so that it makes a one close curve. You see it up here, you also see it up here. So and then you can change, let's say we would want this to show up. You can change the display color and make this display color green, so that now when we select everything, we know that our scene silhouette is slightly different, right? It's called a different color. I'm gonna make it blue just for consistency with another drawing that I made previously, but that's how you would get a isometric into somewhat of a kind of decent stage for exporting. The last thing I would just recommend when we're talking about isometrics is you can have, let's say this is not the project you're working on, and you have a topography or you have something else going on in the surrounding context, but you want the scene silhouette of this object. You could do the same thing. You can, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to lock my landform so that I can't select it, so that anything else that I am selecting shows up. I don't want this for now, and I don't want this part of this road to show. So, and you can go ahead and type make 2D and say, hey, I want an isometric of this object. I'm just not gonna use a tangent or inlines, whatever. You just want the scene silhouette, and then what's gonna happen, it's gonna give you this, right? So you can take this, you can clean it up, and end up with the scene silhouette of that object, and then place it within the landform itself, so that your design can also pop up in that context. And this will make sense when we talk about exporting, because I already did this a little bit, but that's something you should start thinking about when you get these deliverables to do these drawings. What am I trying to communicate, and would be the best way, using these sort of regular conventions of expressing your design through drawing. That could be something you can think about in that. So again, just keep working on it, cleaning it up. Great. Now the other last drawing I wanted to talk about for exporting is section drawing. How will you do a section drawing? So, and the same thing would apply with the section in a floor plan, because they're just cuts through a building, through an object, etc. So I'm going to hide this. I'm going to hide this as well, so that we're back with this design right here by itself. And we're going to introduce a clipping plane right now. Right? So a clipping plane is kind of an imaginary plane in where you tell it where it's going to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I'm very interested to see what happens if when I cut through this structure right here. And before I do that, sorry, repeat again. When you type the command, if you look here at this panel up here, it's gonna give you options, and Rhino does this for basically any and every tool. Because I want a section, I'm gonna say I want it to be vertical. So it's just gonna ask us what our edge is. So I want to cut right through the middle, and then I can go ahead and using my left view or my isometric view, some type of vertical view, I'm just gonna add the height. This really doesn't matter that much, right? How tall you make it, because it's gonna clip it regardless. I'm gonna go here, and then you click, and then we can't see it right now because it is not showing in this particular rendered setting, but it is showing in this view, in this back view and in this top view. And if you notice, in my top view, it cut it because it's probably where we started or ended the command. So it cut the object, and it has this line that is perpendicular and pointing in a direction. It's basically telling you, oh, we cut here and we're looking in this way, right? It's a directional kind of line, which is basically telling us, again, we cut through here, we're not seeing this information, we're looking from here from right to left. But I'm gonna go ahead and change this to shaded so we can start seeing it, right? And also right to shaded. Another thing you could start doing is making a layer for the clipping plane, which I already did previously. And I can go ahead and say, hey, I want to change this, make it a clipping plane layer. Now it's going to look green so that it's easier to see. And see how I clicked on it, and now I have the properties of this clipping plane. It's active in the top view, but it's not active in the other views. So you can just click on it. It's gonna start cutting it where we want it, and we really just wanted it on our left view, right? So that's great because we now start seeing what's going on. We can also flip the direction, and now we just see how facing the other way, how that would start to look like. And if you were not doing that, clicking here in the panels, you can also learn about enable clipping plane and disable clipping plane. So I could also enable it by doing that, right? Or disable it by just typing it. So different options to do the same thing. Great, so now we have this here, and if you'll notice, you have darker lines, darker green lines, because that's the color of this clipping plane layer. Where it's showing us every single moment where it started to cut through the object that you designed, right? And if you wanted to export this drawing, you just type make 2D again, and we are going to have the clipping plane intersection toggled. So that's basically any moment the clipping plane passed through an object, it's gonna show, which is basically those darker green lines that I pointed out earlier. We're gonna call this section drawing. Click OK. And there you have this. Oh, wait a second. Let's go back. Okay, so the reason why it only exported that is because I had this layer locked from previously, right? Previous moment in this tutorial. So we're gonna go back again, and we're going to now select it, and now we have both the landform and the object selected. Type make 2D, and then we're gonna call it, move it into the same layer, click OK, and now it's thinking, and it gave us this particular view. So I'm just gonna show you in the layers here again. Now we have an extra sub layer that's called clipping plane intersections, and if I turn off my curves, it's basically all this is the moments that Rhino is understanding that it cut through through the object, right? Some information might be missing, so it's a matter for you to adding and editing and cleaning up this drawing, because again, the software has good tools, but sometimes things might be missing. Like it didn't show us these lines where it cut through the building, through the roof. So you can add them, saying, hey, these lines should not be in curves, they should not be in clipping plane, intersections, right? And then you start cleaning up the drawing, which again, you could use the trim tool. To clean up and make something. Right, so, because again, Rhino is just going to give you what it understands. It doesn't really understand that a line needs to be continuous. It's just thinking about the different surfaces and solids that you use to make your object. So it's your responsibility to edit the drawing and preparing it before you send it. But yeah, that's how you would make a section. You could have done the same thing. Let's say we had flipped the direction of this you could easily have also made a isometric section like this. You could use the gumball tool and rotate this and start getting floor plans, right? We can also see what that would look like if we start seeing it in the top view, right? So it's a lot to play with. I'm gonna deselect from here. Okay. And then I'm going to turn off this. So that's basically, I think, a good rundown of the different tools, Make2D tool and the clipping plane command for preparing like a basic set of drawings. Then the last thing I want to show is just how do you export it, prepare for Illustrator and export it. So I'm going to turn on this layer, which was a previous Make2D that I had made. And if you notice, I have this darker blue line going around the object that I designed, and it's basically something that I had spent a little bit of time just to highlight, and as I said, bring attention to the object within the landform so that it stands out a little bit. And I'm ready to export this and bring it into Illustrator, right? Ready to bring it into Illustrator. So what I would say you need to do, just make sure you center your drawing, you move it close to the origin point, and that's going to be very important. If you have your drawing all the way in Jupyter, right here, it's probably not going to show up in your Illustrator, because even though Rhino basically seems to have an infinite plane, all these other softwares, and in this case Illustrator, does not. So you want to move it to the around the 0 point, because Illustrator is going to recognize that when you open up the file. Okay, so let's say we have this drawing, we're ready to export it, and it's in a good condition that any other edits we can make in Illustrator. Great. you just select it, you go to File, Export Selected, and then we're gonna name it Rhino to Illustrator or whatever, it could be isometric drawing, whatever. Drawing. I'm just gonna save it in my downloads. I'll probably have a folder. And then in the Save As type, you have options where one of them is Adobe Illustrator. If you've seen, I've already made a few other exports. And you just click Save. And then this box is going to show up. This is right now, because I don't have a specific scale I want to plot or anything. I'm going to keep snapshot of current view. But if you were making these drawings as part of a set of deliverables and you were given a particular scale, and you know that in anything that you made that is a feet is supposed to be like a quarter of an inch, an eighth of an inch, 16th of an inch, you can do that, right? You can just say, oh, it's a quarter of an inch, right? Because it's going to 0.25, right? And Rhino is going to be able to export it accordingly. I'm just going to keep it 1:1. Just keep a snapshot because I'm going to resize it in Illustrator. Now, if you are going to print, make it CMYK, color, RGB, but that's also something you can change in Illustrator without much issue. And yeah, I wouldn't play too much with these things, right? If you had, as part of your drafting in Rhino, you have made some hatches, and for some reason you would want to change that solid fills, you could do that as a way of then preparing for maybe adding patterns or hatches with Illustrator. The reason is probably also because the hatches do not take a lot of memory, CPU memory, or will not ask too much of your computer here in Rhino. But when Illustrator reads that set of drawing, those individual hatch lines are gonna be identified as separate lines, and it might put a bit of a toll on your computer. So that might be a reason you might want to do that. Anyways, gonna keep these things. I'm ordering the layers. Doesn't really matter as much either because I am going to reorder them also in Illustrator. And you click OK. Once you click OK, you can see here, up here, that it says file successfully saved in the location that I had told it earlier, and you are ready to go into Illustrator. So that is part 1 of this series. Hopefully it made a lot of sense. Yes, go back to the second one of the series, and we're gonna open up this drawing in Illustrator and play a little bit with line weights, a little bit with color, a little bit with texture. So yeah, great. Have a great one.